Let me tell you a story. There was someone who learned very early that feelings were dangerous. Not because emotions themselves were harmful, but because every time they opened their heart, something sharp slipped inside. A broken promise. A sudden shift in someone's tone. A door closing a little too loudly. A silence that felt like punishment. So they adapted. They learned how to live with their heart wrapped quietly behind their ribs, locked away where no one could reach it. Not to hurt anyone, but to protect themselves. This is where emotional unavailability begins. Not in coldness, not in cruelty, but in fear. Real fear. Deep fear. The kind that follows a person for years without saying a word. People think emotional unavailability means someone doesn't care. But in reality, it means they care so much that caring terrifies them. They don't avoid emotions because they don't have them. They avoid emotions because they feel them too intensely. And so, they build distance. Not physical distance, but emotional distance. Measured in guarded words, controlled tone, delayed replies, and carefully timed silence. They give just enough to keep the connection alive, but never enough for anyone to truly hold them. They let people in, but only to a point. A safe point. A predictable point. A point where nothing can go wrong. Because beyond that point, things always have. For emotionally unavailable people, closeness feels like stepping into a room where the floor might collapse. Love feels like a risk without safety measures. Vulnerability feels like standing unarmed in front of someone holding a weapon they may not even know they're holding. It isn't that they don't want intimacy. They want it so much that the desire itself scares them. Deep inside, they carry a quiet belief shaped by old wounds. If someone sees the real version of me, they'll leave. So they stay surface level. They keep conversations calm, controlled, light. They joke instead of confess. They deflect instead of admit. They change the topic instead of revealing the truth. And here's the thing most people never understand. Emotional unavailability is not about the absence of emotion. It's about the fear of emotional consequences. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of depending on someone who may not stay. Fear of repeating the same pain that shaped them. And sometimes, fear of recognizing parts of themselves they aren't ready to confront. Because intimacy isn't just about letting someone see you. It's about seeing yourself through their eyes. And that is terrifying for someone who has been judged, dismissed, or made to feel too much or not enough. Emotionally unavailable people don't fail to connect. They simply freeze when connection becomes real. The closer someone gets, the more their internal alarms start ringing. Not because anything is wrong, but because closeness has never felt safe. They've learned to expect disappointment, to prepare for loss, to brace for the moment the other person changes their mind. So they withdraw first. They protect themselves by staying one step behind, one emotion behind, one confession behind. It's not manipulation, it's self-preservation. And yes, they know it hurts people. They know their silence creates confusion. They know their distance feels personal. They know that their calm, guarded demeanor sometimes looks like apathy. But they're not trying to avoid love. They're trying to avoid pain. And here's the part that cuts the deepest. Emotionally unavailable people often feel lonely even when they choose the loneliness. They crave what they fear. They desire what they avoid. They want to connect, but can't hold on to the feeling long enough without panicking. Their heart says, I want this. Their mind says, this will hurt. Their body says, run. So they run, not away from the person, but away from themselves. And it isn't always romantic. Sometimes it shows up in friendships too. in family dynamics, in simple conversations where honesty begins to feel heavy. Whenever the emotional temperature rises, they shut the door, not slamming it, just quietly turning the lock. To the outside world, they appear distant. To themselves, they feel safe. But safety has a cost. Emotional distance protects them from pain. But it also protects them from love, tenderness, intimacy, and connection. People imagine emotional unavailability as a coldness. But truly, it's a wound. A wound wrapped in logic, discipline, and silence. A wound disguised as independence. A wound disguised as I'm fine. A wound disguised as I don't need anything from anyone. Here's the irony. Emotionally unavailable people often give the most when no one is looking. They care in ways they never admit. They notice details others miss. They think too much about the people they keep at a distance. They love quietly in the spaces between their walls. They feel everything, just not out loud. And if you've ever wondered why emotionally unavailable people seem so calm, unbothered, or detached, it's because their emotions flow inward, not outward. They process privately. They hurt privately. They heal privately. They carry storms inside their silence. And the root of it all? The core psychology? A single belief that shaped them long ago. Feeling deeply means losing control. So they teach themselves to stop feeling, to numb, to think instead of feel, to analyze instead of express, to withdraw instead of risk. But here's the quiet truth. Emotionally unavailable people don't need someone to break their walls. They need someone who doesn't try to tear them down in the first place. They need patience without pressure, presence without demands, connection without interrogation, consistency without threat. Because emotional unavailability isn't permanent. It's protective. And protection softens when safety appears. One day, slowly, quietly, the emotionally unavailable person begins to unlock small pieces of themselves. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just gently. A longer conversation. A more open sentence. A softer expression. A clue. A crack in the armor. And that's how healing starts. Not with grand gestures, but with small moments of trust. In the end, emotionally unavailable people aren't incapable of love. They're capable of loving so deeply that the depth itself terrifies them. They are not cold. They are not distant. They are not uncaring. They are simply protecting a heart that has felt too much for too long. And when they're ready, when safety finally outweighs fear, they will love with the depth, loyalty, honesty, and tenderness. That feels like a language only two people in the world know. Because emotional unavailability is not the absence of emotion. It is the quiet, careful management of a heart that still remembers every bruise.